Good morning. Today I'm presenting the key ideas from my annotated bibliography and how they inform my research proposal. My inquiry asks, how do school-level expectations influence how primary teachers implement the Personal and Social Capability, or PSC, in the Australian Curriculum version 9 at St. Rita's School, Babinda? PSC is positioned as a core general capability that supports students' well-being, relationships, and self-regulation. Yet in practice, its implementation varies significantly across schools. In my context, PSC often competes with other priorities, and that tension is what led me to this research. Across the literature and my annotated bibliography, four themes consistently emerged: curriculum and policy framing, teacher decision-making, school and classroom context, student outcomes. These themes help explain why PSC looks the way it does in different settings, and why St. Rita's, as a small rural Catholic school, offers a particularly important case. The first theme relates to how PSC is framed in policy and curriculum. Research shows that PSC is not a fixed skill set. F. Clydes and Morato describe it as an emerging from complex interactions between cognitive, metacognitive, and affective processes, which means teachers must interpret it rather than simply deliver it. A consistent finding across the literature is that policy enactment is not linear. Teachers translate curriculum expectations through the realities of their context. Studies by Parker, Ma, and others show that teachers often adapt, prioritize, or even symbolically comply with PSC depending on workload, leadership expectations, and available resources. At St. Rita's, PSC is often embedded through Catholic identity, pastoral care, and behaviour expectations rather than through explicit PSC lessons. This reflects contextual adaptation rather than resistance. The second theme focuses on how teachers make decisions about PSC. Teachers draw on their own interpretations of the curriculum, their professional learning, and their reflective practice. But their decisions are also shaped by emotional labour and workload. Research by Noble and McGrath, Wigglesworth, and others highlights that wellbeing initiatives place significant emotional demands on teachers. They are often managing both student wellbeing and their own, while also meeting academic and behavioural expectations. In my research, I've noted that teacher wellbeing is a major influence on PSC enactment, and at St. Rita's, teachers carry multiple roles: academic, pastoral, behavioural, relational, and this shapes what they can realistically do with PSC. In a small staff with limited specialist support, teachers often prioritise immediate relational or behavioural needs. This is not a deficit, it is a reflection of the context. The third theme is the ecological context of the school. Research consistently shows that educational practice is shaped by community expectations, school culture, and access to resources. This is particularly true in rural settings where schools often function as central wellbeing hubs. My research notes that PSC is enacted through community relationships, Catholic identity, and local expectations rather than formalised curriculum structures. This aligns with research on relational pedagogy, which shows that PSC and CEL are most effectively developed through interactions, co-regulation, and everyday routines. Studies by Ng and Sun, Noble and McGrath, and others highlight that capability development is deeply relational. At St. Rita's, multi-age classrooms and strong community ties means that PSC is often lived rather than explicitly taught. Teachers rely on modelling, shared expectations, and relational consistency. The fourth theme focuses on student outcomes. The literature consistently shows that PSC supports engagement, collaboration, and self-regulation. However, these outcomes depend on how PSC is enacted, and that enactment is shaped by school-level expectations. Several studies emphasise that observable classroom practices, teacher-student interactions, peer dynamics, and behavioural norms are often more accurate indicators of PSC development than curriculum documents themselves. This is why my proposed research includes classroom observations to capture the lived relational nature of PSC at St. Rita's. Across the literature, several gaps stand out. Many studies assume that PSC and CEL frameworks apply universally, without considering cultural, contextual, or socio-economic diversity. Rural schools in particular are underrepresented. My research highlights several specific gaps: an over-reliance on student self-report, limited insight into teacher emotional labour, a lack of rural teacher perspectives, and minimal research on how PSC is interpreted in practice. St. Rita's sits directly within these gaps. It is rural, Catholic, small, and contextually complex, yet these types of schools are rarely examined in PSC research. Politically, ACARA V9 and NCCD requirements increase administrative load. Economically, the school often acts as a social safety net for families experiencing instability. Socially, the tight-knit community creates high relational expectations. Technologically, digital inequity affects curriculum delivery. And legally, compliance demands consume teacher time. Environmentally, cyclones and flooding disrupt attendance and routines. These pressures mean that PSC is enacted within a complex ecosystem that shapes teacher capacity and decision making. Because of these gaps in contextual realities, my proposed research will use a qualitative case study approach. As outlined in my PowerPoint, data collection will include teacher interviews and reflective journals, classroom observations, a document analysis of ACARA V9, behaviour policies, pastoral care frameworks, and Catholic ethos documents. Student voice through guided conversations or draw and talk activities may be applied depending on the research. This design directly responds to the gaps identified in the literature and aligns with the relational contextual nature of PSC at St. Rita's. To conclude, the literature studied shows that PSC implementation is shaped by policy interpretation, emotional labour, relational pedagogy, and contextual realities. It also shows that rural teacher perspectives are missing from the current research. St. Rita's School Babinda provides a rich and under-examined context where PSC is enacted through Catholic identity, community expectations, and relational practice. My proposed research aims to illuminate how school-level expectations shape PSC in this setting, contributing both to local practice and to broader understandings of wellbeing, capability, and policy enactment in Australian primary schools. As you can see, there are many implications when considering St. Rita's Babinda. The Petzl analysis has been devised to study the implications that St. Rita's faces when having to enact PSC.